Substances can be separated into their components by various methods like hand-picking, winnowing, sedimentation, decantation, sieving, filtration, etc. Each component of a mixture has its own unique property. Based on this property, components can be separated. Hand-picking. The separation method which involves manual picking. Hand-picking is adopted when the undesirable components of the mixture are present in small quantities. This method is adopted based on the size, shape, and color of the solid components in a mixture. Example: stones, pulses, small pieces of other grains can be removed from rice grains by hand-picking method. Winnowing. Winnowing is used to separate heavier and lighter components of a mixture by wind or by blowing air. Example: winnowing is mainly used to separate husk from paddy grains. The mixture is thrown up in the air by one person using a plate-like device. The grains used to separate husk. Here, light particles like husk are blown away and heavier particles like paddy grains are left out. Winnowing machines are used for winnowing in rice mills. Sedimentation, decantation, and filtration. The process of settling down heavier insoluble solid components in a solution is called as sedimentation. The component of mixture which settles down is called as sediment, and the clear liquid is called as supernatant. Example: when muddy water is allowed to stand for some time, mud and sand particles settle down as sediments. The clear water is obtained as a supernatant. The process of transferring the clear liquid without disturbing the sediment is called as decantation. Example: the supernatant is slowly poured into a beaker without disturbing the mud settled as a sediment by the process of decantation. But decantation cannot separate the components of a mixture completely. The method of separating an insoluble suspended component of a solution using a filter is called as filtration. In this process, the solution which is decanted is allowed to pass through perforated membrane called as filter. The filters can vary with their pore sizes, which allow only liquid particles to pass through them. The suspended particles which cannot pass through the filter paper are left behind in the paper. Filter paper acts as a strainer. A filter can be filter paper, muslin cloth, cotton layer, layer of sand, etc. The clear liquid collected after filtration is called as filtrate. The suspended component left behind in the filter is called as the residue. Example: fruit juices are filtered to separate the seeds and pulp particles using a muslin cloth. Sieving and filtration. It is the separation method used to separate solid components of a solid mixture. It is based on the difference of particle size of the components in a mixture. Sieving is done by using a small device called a sieve. A sieve has small holes of uniform size. Smaller particles pass through the holes of a sieve and bigger particles are retained in the sieve. The sieves differ with their sizes of holes. Example: a big slanting sieve is used to remove pieces of stones, husks from the wheat. A small round sieve is used to separate impurities from the flour. Sometimes, pearls of different sizes are separated.
Store. Ask the genie for help.
Hello. So you need help separating the dirt and dust from the grains in this bowl. For this, we have to use methods called sedimentation and decantation. Let me demonstrate. When water is added to the grains, the dust and dirt mixed with the grains dissolves in the water, making it muddy. Thus, the dirt and grains are separated. The grains settle at the bottom because they are heavier than the water mixed with the dirt. This process of the settling of heavier substance is called sedimentation. Now, the muddy water can be separated from the grains by simply tilting and pouring out the water. This process is called decantation. To get the key to the door to move on, select the right process for separation of the substances.
I know sedimentation and decantation.
That's right. You have your key.
Yes. Got through the first problem. Let's see what's next.
Separate the oil and water in this beaker by selecting the right method.
Water is heavier than oil, so it should settle at the bottom if I leave it alone for some time. It's settling at the bottom and the oil is at the top. Now the oil can simply be poured out of the beaker. This means the process to separate water and oil is sedimentation and decantation. Yes, level cleared.
Solve a challenge to break this wall. Click on Enter for more. Clean this water by separating the mud from it. Ask Genie for help.
That water is really dirty. You're going to need the right method to clean it up. This water can be completely cleaned using a filter paper. While water passes through the fine pores of the filter, dirt will sift out, leaving the water clean. This process of using a filter to separate substances is called filtration. This will work as long as the holes or pores of the filter are small enough to keep the larger substance and let the smaller substance pass through. Now that this water is clean, aha! This problem is a little more complicated. It is a mixture of sand and salt, which are both too fine to separate by hand, or by sieving, or even by filtration alone. To solve this problem, you will have to use a combination of methods. Let me try. The first method we'll use is sedimentation and decantation. Let's put this mixture in water and wait for the sand to settle. Then, we will decant the salty water, which will separate the sand from the mixture. Now, we have to separate the salt from the water. You might remember that the process of evaporation can be used for this. Let's heat this water. We can collect some of the water that is turning into steam using condensation by placing this cold metal lid on it. Look, the water has been boiled away, leaving the salt behind. So we have successfully separated the sand, salt, and water using a combination of sedimentation Kevin and Tina are on a road trip with their parents. This lesson is about various methods of separation. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain the reasons for separating substances. You will also be able to describe the methods of separation of substances such as hand-picking, threshing, winnowing, and sieving.
Looks like we have a problem with the car. The engine is overheated. Don't know why. I'll have to get a mechanic.
Hey, Tina, look. We have stopped right near someone's farmland. I wonder if we can take a walk and see it up close. Dad, can we go up to those huts and take a look at this farm while you fix the car?
Okay, but be careful and don't go too far. Your mom and I will keep an eye on you both from here.
Hello, who are you?
Our car has broken down nearby, but our dad is working on it. We just came by to take a look at your farm. Would you mind?
Not at all. In fact, I can show you around if you're interested. Let me just finish cleaning these grains.
Cleaning the grains? How do you do that?
Well, I'm just picking out the impurities in these grains by hand. The grains are quite big in size, and the amount of grain that I need to clean is not much. So I can do that quite easily. Hand-picking allows me to separate the good grains from the waste and impurities, so that I have clean dal to cook for dinner tonight.
Hand-picking is the basic method for separation of substances. It involves simply picking out substances by hand and separating them from others. The substances being separated may be impurities that have to be thrown away, like in this case. Or it may be that both the substances being separated are useful, such as if you separate green grapes from black ones from a mixture of the two.
I'm done hand-picking these grains. Let's take a walk around the farm now. As you can see, these are wheat fields. The wheat is ready for harvest now. Look, there's my husband.
What is he doing?
He's threshing some of the wheat that has been harvested and dried.
Threshing? What's that?
Yes. Once the wheat has been harvested, the stalks are dried. Then, each grain of wheat has to be separated from the stalks to which it's attached, so that it can be ground into flour. This method of separating the grain from the stalk is called threshing. It's basically the beating of these dry stalks to shake off the dried grains. It can be done by hand, by cattle, or by using machines. Traditionally, threshing was done by hand, but the cattle help do this job quickly. Nowadays, threshing machines are also used to separate large quantities of grain at a time. We have one of these machines. It's called a combine harvester. You can see it there in the distance.
This is a smart way to separate grain from stalk. Imagine how long
Wheat has been threshed. All that's left to do is grind it into wheat flour, right?
Not quite. There is another step before that. You see, even though the large stalks can be separated from the grains by threshing, the wheat grains still have dried husk and chaff, which has to be separated and thrown away before the wheat can be ground.
But can that be done by hand picking?
No, it would be too difficult and would take too much time. Instead, we use a method called winnowing. Let me show you. In this basket, I have some wheat grains that are still mixed with their husk. Watch what happens now.
the husk is blowing away.
That's right. The husk is much lighter than the grain. So when I shake it gently and let it drop to the ground, only the wheat grains collect here, while the husk blows away.
Wow, that's a neat way of separating wheat from husk.
So, do you sell the grains in the market once they have been cleaned?
Yes, sometimes. However, we also have a grinding unit on our farm. So we're able to sell finished wheat flour or atta in the market. This is our small wheat grinding machine. Cleaned wheat grains are poured in from the top of the machine. The machine grinds the wheat into a fine powder or flour, which comes out from this opening and collects at the bottom in these large bags.
And then this flour is packaged and taken away to sell in the market?
Not right away. There is one final step that needs to be completed before it can be sold. You see, this machine grinds the wheat quite well, but there are still some thicker pieces or granules in the flour that need to be separated and thrown away. This is called the wheat bran. Can you guess how this is separated from the wheat flour?
Well, it can't be winnowing since we don't want the flour to blow away in the wind.
That's right. Instead, the method we use to separate this is called sieving. Sieving is a method of separating substances that are of different sizes. For example, this wheat flour has some fine powdered wheat as well as some bigger impurities. When I put this through a sieve, the fine powder falls through the small holes in the sieve, while the thicker impurities remain as they are too big for these holes. And hence, the substances are separated. Once the wheat has been sieved, it is packaged and is ready to be sold.